The blood moon hung low and fierce in the night sky, casting an eerie crimson glow over the clearing where the ceremony was unfolding. The clan had gathered in solemn rows, their faces unreadable, tense in the charged silence. Leora stood at the center, her heart pounding with a desperate hope that today, this night, would change everything. The scar along her left cheekbone stung with the cold wind that whispered through the pines, that she would not give in. Not now, not after all she had endured. Her hands were clenched at her sides, knuckles white beneath the sleeves of her modest tunic. The scent of pine needles, damp earth, and the faint metallic tang of blood freshly spilled from the altar filled her senses. She had cleaned the blood moon altar with reverent care just hours before, the only act of devotion left to her in a world sudden and cruel. But as the tribe's elders gathered around, their faces slowly twisted with accusation, a freezing dread seeped into her bones. "Leora," the chieftain's voice rang out, cold and sharp, "you stand accused of betrayal." The words struck like an axe to her chest. Betrayal! She had never imagined the night would come when those 3 syllables would hang over her like a noose. "I did no such thing," she said, voice trembling but firm. Her deep amber eyes scanned the circle of faces, some of them friends, or at least acquaintances. Now hardened strangers, a ripple of whispers rolled through the gathered crowd. Among them, jagged shards of fear and suspicion cut through the night. She saw the way the elder woman, Mara, watched her with narrowed eyes, and the quiet contempt in old Josen's gaze. "You conspired with enemy forces," the chieftain declared without hesitation. His stormy grey eyes, usually steady and commanding, sparked with a cold fury that felt personal. "You have endangered the entire clan." "No," Leora's breath caught, her voice breaking despite herself. "I swear on the blood moon I am innocent." But innocence meant nothing here. When the blood moon stained the sky red, judgment came swift and harsh, and mercy was a stranger. The crowd parted like a roaring river, and there was nowhere to hide. The guards advanced, their dark leather armor glinting in the eerie light, hands tightening on the hilts of their weapons. "Take her," the chieftain's command was the final verdict. Leora's legs moved of their own accord, fleeing the circle of light, the judgment, the whispers that clawed at her soul. The cold forest swallowed her almost immediately, the branches catching at her hair, the underbrush clutching her ankles as she ran. Beneath the crimson moon, the woods seemed alive with shadows, creatures that watched but did not move. Pain exploded through her side as she stumbled over a root, her breath hitching in her throat. Blood blossomed on her tunic near the scar on her cheek, fresh wounds from where the guards had struck her before she escaped. Her chest heaved, lungs burning with each ragged breath. She collapsed beneath a towering pine, the moonlight filtering through heavy branches in scattered shards above her. Tears slipped down her cheek as the bitter truth sank in. She was alone, hunted, and cast out by those she once trusted. A low, mournful growl shattered the silence, vibrating through the earth beneath her. Leora stiffened, senses sharpening despite the exhaustion. From the darkness, a massive shape materialized, fur as black as the void between stars, eyes glinting with an unnatural intelligence and wildness. The Alpha King's beast. Leora froze, heart pounding anew, not with fear, but with something unfamiliar, something like recognition. The beast, massive and powerful, moved closer, cautious yet drawn inexplicably to her presence. Its stormy grey eyes, mirrors of the chieftain's, fixed on her with raw curiosity. Its growl softened into a whine, almost human in its plaintive sorrow, as if it too had been waiting, lonely and restless beneath the cursed blood moon. She reached out a trembling hand, half expecting pain, but the beast did not pull away. Instead, it nudged her gently, its heavy breath warm on her knuckles, and for a fleeting moment, everything else, the accusations, the betrayal, the cold world beyond, slipped away into the shadows. Far beyond the forest's edge, in the towering stone keep where the Alpha King ruled, Kaelin stood by the window of his chamber, his stormy grey eyes narrowed as the moon's blooded glow filtered in. The sensation was electric, a tug on his senses, a silent call threading through the night like a secret pulse. The beast had not returned with its usual restless pace. Something had changed. And in the depths of his instincts Kaelin knew, a stranger lingered within their lands. A presence that walked the familiar shadows into unfamiliar terrain. Days later, circumstances that neither of them fully understood forced Leora into the Alpha King's keep, her movements wary, her body still weak, but spirit unyielding. She was no prisoner, yet not truly free, bound by necessity and suspicion. She was ushered through high-vaulted corridors where whispers seemed to chase her steps, and cold eyes followed like spectres. The guard's grip was tight but not cruel, and, despite the tension burning between them, no one raised a hand. The Alpha King's territory had its own laws, laws written in blood and silence. She was led to a small chamber attached to the great hall, a place as stark as her exile. In the centre, draped with ceremonial cloths and the fading stains of past rituals, stood the sacred blood moon altar. It was a heavy slab of stone, worn smooth and stained crimson in places that no soap or water could ever fully erase. The air hung thick with the scent of incense and old magic. Leora. The altar beckoned her, a silent challenge and a balm to her frayed nerves. She set to work, first steadying her breath, then gathering the coarse linen cloths left in a basket nearby. Her fingers trembled as they dipped into the warm water, the rhythm of scrubbing and wiping a fragile tether to normalcy. Her muscles ached, and her scar itched beneath the steady moisture, but she welcomed the pain. It was proof she was alive, proof she hadn't surrendered to the darkness. Unseen by her, the beast watched from the shadows beyond the great doors, his massive form coiled like a black sentinel, eyes glowing with cautious hope. His restless energy softened, drawn to the quiet strength radiating from the lone woman tending the sacred altar. For the first time, he stepped forward. The heavy oak doors creaked open with a reluctant groan, a slow intrusion into Leora's solitude. She did not flinch, though her heart thrummed against her ribs like a frantic bird. The beast padded silently into the room, careful not to disturb the sacred space she so reverently maintained. He lingered at the edge of her vision, a living shadow, and something about his presence stilled the chaos inside her. The warmth of his breath brushed her skin, as if assuring her that despite everything, she was not utterly forsaken. Kaelin entered moments later, silence trailing in his wake. His gaze shifted to the altar, then to Leora, the woman so singularly poised between vulnerability and defiance. "Why do you clean it?" His voice was low, edged with curiosity, and something deeper, an unbidden respect that prickled beneath the surface of his usual command. Leora met his stormy grey eyes with steady amber. "Because it must be done," she said quietly. "Because, even when I am cast out, the night remains sacred. The blood moon demands it." Kaelin studied her, noting the remnants of bruises and the fierce calm she wore like armor. The scar on her cheek caught the moonlight, a silent testament to battles fought both seen and unseen. The beast nudged his heavy head against Leora's hip, an unexpected gesture of acceptance, as if the creature sensed that a bond was forming, something old, something new, something neither man nor beast fully understood. Kaelin's jaw clenched, the weight of his crown suddenly less certain against the silent power weaving between them. The woman, who was supposed to be a stranger, an outsider, became the axis around which the fragile piece of his world began to turn. And, as the blood moon hung heavy above them, casting its crimson glow through stained glass and timber, an uneasy alliance was forged in the quiet act of cleaning the sacred altar, a bond neither could yet name, but both would soon come to depend on. Leora felt it too, beneath the years of suspicion and pain, beneath the exile and whispered threats. Something unbreakable stirred, an ember flickering to life in the cold night, promising that even in darkness a new dawn could rise. Leora stood just beyond the flickering torchlight that lined the great hall's stone walls, the shadowed expanse between her and Kaelin, thick with unspoken truths and grievances buried deep beneath years of loyalty and suspicion. His eyes, sharp and wary as ever, fixed on her like a blade, unflinching and cold. The silence stretched taut until she finally broke it, not with supplication, but with the steady conviction that had become her shield. "I was set up," she said, her voice clear and unwavering despite the knot of tension in her chest. "Someone else wanted me gone, to break the circle, to ruin the sanctity of this night and this realm." Kaelin's stormy eyes narrowed, shadows flickering across the planes of his angular face. "Seta." "Convenient," he replied, biting off the words with deliberate chill, testing her resolve with the weight of his doubt. "If that is true, why have you remained silent until now? Why risk returning here, contaminating the king's hall with your presence, after the judgment was passed?" Leora met that challenge directly, her amber eyes, steady fingers tightening around the edge of the altar cloth she had folded moments before. "And because the beast that howled beside you in the dark has recognized something in me, something more than what these walls have been willing to see." The king's lips pressed into a thin line. There was no warmth in his gaze, only the steel of command, hardened by years of betrayal. Forearms crossed over his broad chest. "You think the beast's acceptance absolves you? You think that quiet companionship weighs heavier than the accusation engraved upon you?" "No," she answered quietly, "but it is a beginning. And beginnings are what this realm needs right now, whether the king admits it or not." Her voice softened just enough to reveal her concession, as if daring him to meet her sincerity halfway. "I did not come here to fight your throne, but to fight the darkness that festers beneath it." Kaelin's eyes flicked toward the floor, the tension in his jaw loosening slightly, an imperceptible crack in the armor he wore, yet his tone remained controlled, authoritative, if not quite so icy. "Then explain yourself. Convince me this was not a trap of political puppeteers or restless enemies." She took a measured step forward, the torchlight catching the faint scar along her cheekbone, softening it into a story no one had ever asked her to tell. The broken jug in the rituals hall, the one used to hold the crimson herbs essential for the ceremony's purity, shattered the night before the blood moon. I was blamed for it, but the evidence points elsewhere. Thieves, or those who wished to rid this place of all servants they deemed unworthy. Kaelin's eyebrows twitched as a flicker of interest surfaced beneath his wariness. "A broken jug is hardly an act of treason." "True," Leora said, tone calm but edged with challenge. "Punishment aimed to scare, to isolate, to break. But if the king of this realm cannot see the difference between a broken vessel and a broken allegiance, then all his walls of ice will crumble beneath him sooner than he expects." Her words, quiet but firm, pulled beneath the surface of his unyielding demeanor. He regarded her for a long moment as though weighing the legitimacy of her challenge. Finally, Kaelin's voice dropped an octave, a reluctant concession veiling itself in command. "Take care with your defiance, Waitress. I have little patience for insolence in my hall, but you have even less for injustice. she said sharply. "I am not here to bend to your whim, King. I am here because the truth demands it, and because I know there is more to your reign than these walls suggest." The tension between them hung thick, electric and raw. Kaelin's jaw tensed again, but beneath it, a subtle warmth threaded through the stern command, a flicker of respect grudgingly earned through their sparring exchange. "So we start there," he said finally, with a hard edge softened by that strange begrudging truce. "Prove your truth with actions, not just words." A silent promise forged in the embers of their confrontation. The king's walls, though still formidable, showed the first faint fisheries as if recognizing she was no ordinary exile, and the darkness threatening his realm might require an unexpected ally. Asterisk, 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 asterisk days, asterisk, 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 asterisk. Forced proximity under Kaelin's vigilant protection was a tension no less suffocating, despite the shelter it provided. The forest air hung dense with the blood moon's waning glow, and the uneasy rhythm of quiet, watchful hours marked the uneasy new order. Leora moved through the shadows and light of the keep like a ghost reclaiming territory. Yet something within her stirred beyond mere survival. The strange powers she had only glimpsed in the quiet moments since her arrival began to weave into the very fabric of her being. Small touch by small touch, life shifted beneath her fingers. It started with the wolves, fierce, restless packs that guarded the outer ramparts with glowing eyes and primal bloodlust, snarling at any who dared approach. They had circled her once with bared teeth, but when Leora reached out tentatively at first, a strange calm ripple travelled from her palm through the snarling growls, soothing snarls that slackened into gentle whimpers. Kaelin watched from the ramparts, hidden in shadows, stormy eyes unreadable but unblinking. "You have a gift," he said quietly one evening, as the last embers of light faded stars. His voice carried a roughness that came from years of command, weighed against an unfathomable solitude. "The wolves listen to you." Leora's fingers folded into her lap, the sensation from before lingering, a hum like distant thunder rolling beneath the skin. "I never understood it until now," she admitted. "A strange pulse beneath the skin. It heals." She hesitated, cheeks coloring to dusk rose. "And it quiets." Kaelin's gaze sharpened, the secret restraint within him battling to stay silent. His beast, the fierce creature that lurked beneath the surface of his humanity, whined low in his mind, clawing against the chains it barely acknowledged. The restless growls echoed like distant storms. Yet, tethered oddly to her, it remained still, inexplicably calmed by her presence. "And you," Kaelin said after a pause so long it began to feel like an invisible thread stretching taut between them, "do you know what this means?" Leora's amber eyes lifted to meet his, steady and unflinching. "That the blood moon's fury may have marked me for something more than exile, and that perhaps this kingdom's salvation lies not in iron and steel, but in quiet strength no one saw coming." Kaelin's lips twitched at the corner, almost the barest flicker of a smile, swallowed quickly beneath the weight of his crown and years lived in shadow. "You are a paradox. Fierce as the wolf, yet gentle as the dawn breaking over these cursed lands." She reached out slowly, placing her hand flat against the rough-hewn stone wall, feeling the pulse of the ancient keep beneath her palm. And then, improbably, the pulse deep within the king standing not far from her. The bond between them, unspoken, elemental, wove itself tighter, fragile, but undeniable. In that silent exchange, neither spoke of trust, nor begged for forgiveness. Instead, something more profound took root. The understanding that beneath the cynicism, beneath the scars and the shadows, there might still be a future where two wounded souls, man and woman, beast and human, reshaped what it meant to rule and what it meant to belong. Her touch lingered on the stone as Kaelin's stormy grey eyes flicked to hers, a storm restrained, a beast tamed, an empire waiting for the dawn, and somewhere deep inside, both knew the blood moon's curse was only just beginning to unravel. The flickering torchlight cast long shadows along the ancient stone corridors of the keep, but it was the weight of the truth that darkened the air between Leora and Kaelin now, heavier than any plague-ridden fog. She stood rigid, every muscle taut, her amber eyes fierce, catching the faint iron tang of blood still lingering in the air from the altar's cleansing. The silence stretched out before them, brittle and sharp, broken only by the low, guttural growl emanating from the shadowed recesses nearby, the unmistakable warning of the Alpha King's beast, restless and protective. "I know the truth," Leora said finally, voice low but unwavering. Slicing through the tension like a sharpened dagger, my so-called betrayal, it wasn't mine. It was never mine. Kaelin's stormy grey gaze bore into her, a tempest of disbelief, suspicion, and something that trembled beneath it, a desperate hope to believe in what she said. "Now," she swallowed, steadying herself against the sudden shiver that threatened to unravel the fragile resolve she'd summoned. "The accusations are part of a larger game, a cruel design by those who would see you, your reign, shattered. Those whispers in the court, the poisoned arrows launched in the dark, they're not just vendettas against me, they're aimed at dethroning you." Kaelin's jaw clenched imperceptibly. "Name them." "The Council's serpent," she spat, the venom clear in her tone. "Alaric Ven!" "The man who swears loyalty with every breath, but thrives on chaos and manipulation. His claws are sunk so deep they bleed into every corner of your kingdom. They used me as a pawn, a scapegoat, to fracture your power from the inside." She stepped closer, unafraid now, her athletic frame solid, her scar catching the torch's glow like a brand. "But I refuse to be played. I refuse to be the weak link in a chain I will damn well break." Kaelin watched her, the lines of his face hardening into something fierce, something protective. "You speak with the fire of a wolf unchained, and yet you place yourself directly in the path of a storm that didn't spare even the strongest." A rumble issued from the shadows, low and steady, a growl of warning that made the hairs along her arms rise. The Alpha King's beast was not just a guardian, but a part of Kaelin's soul laid bare, and it had not yet accepted this new alliance lightly. Leora's fingers clenched into fists, the surge of defiance raw and unyielding. "Then let that storm come. If the court wishes to tear us apart, it will find neither broken nor bending, but a woman who stands and fights side by side with her king. Or not at all." Kaelin's eyes softened for a breath, shadows folding back into the folds of his expression. "You are no mere pawn, Leora. You are a force they have yet to reckon with." But before agreement could settle between them, the distant clatter of armored boots echoed down the corridor, sharp and urgent. The air shifted, threaded with danger. The subtle scent of iron and sweat sharpened, mixing with the ancient dust of the hallways. It was the sound of the court's poison tightening around its prey. "Outsiders!" Kaelin murmured, voice low but electric. "They have come!" Leora felt the weight of unseen eyes knife through the wall's eyes that sought to use her as a weapon, or worse, as a corpse left to rot beneath the blood moon's curse. The beast's growl grew deeper, more insistent, as if warning of the impending snare. There was no time for hesitation. The moment shattered with violent suddenness. A blade flashed from the shadows, lightning quick and cold aimed straight for Leora's heart. The movement was so swift that instinct alone propelled her backward, and yet it was Kaelin who caught the strike not, with shield or sword, but with sheer, raw force. His hand closed around the attacker's wrist, twisting savagely as the would-be assassin hissed in pain. Leora's heart hammered against her ribs as the corridor exploded into chaos. The trusted walls of the keep seemed to crumble under the weight of betrayal incarnate. She barely had time to comprehend that the knife came from a man she had once called advisor, a face she had trusted, until it had turned to venom and treachery. Alaric, she breathed, a bitter edge around the name. Kaelin's eyes flashed with a predatory light, and the beast within him surged forward, as if released by the scent of blood and betrayal. The man spat curses barely audible and lunged again, but Kaelin was faster, a whirlwind of calculated violence. The advisor crumpled to the stone floor, disarmed and broken, the fight sucked out of him by the king's overwhelming presence. "Are you wounded?" Kaelin demanded, voice a growl that filled the hollow halls and rattled her heart. Leora shook her head, still gripping the sleeve where the blade had grazed her. The pain was there, but it was nothing compared to the betrayal, just the reminder that trust can be a blade as lethal as any dagger. Kaelin stepped close, unyielding, shielding her with a presence that made the air around them crackle. The beast growled once more, low and fierce, a guardian not just of the flesh, but of this fragile new bond forming in the crucible of danger. "Why, Leora?" Kaelin asked quietly, as if each word was painstakingly dredged from the churning depths of his guarded soul. "Why did you never tell me who they truly were?" Target on her back, to invite the full fury of the court's poison. But more than fear, there was pride, refusal to be seen as broken or helpless. "I survived by silence," she said, voice steady though the storm raged fiercely within, "because if I gave voice to every shadow, I would drown beneath their lies. But I'm done surviving. Now I fight, and I fight with you." For a heartbeat, the distance between them shrank until it was the space of shared breath and quiet understanding. The beast settled, its growl turning to a low rumble of ease, mirrored in the thrum of Kaelin's chest beneath armored flesh. A tremor of something unspoken passed between them, trust blooming like a fragile flower in winter's blistering chill. "Together," Kaelin said finally. Their hands brushed, tentative as a whispered promise, before the king's grip tightened just enough to anchor her to this moment, to this fragile alliance. The walls of the keep, stained with past betrayals and swept clean in ritual, now held a new chapter in their ancient stones. A story not of exile and suspicion, but of defiant unity in the face of encroaching shadows. Beyond, the blood moon waned slowly, but the night was far from over. Somewhere in the darkness, enemies lurked, yet neither king nor beast, neither woman nor warrior, would bow without a fight. Leora met Kaelin's storm-grey gaze and found there, not just a ruler scarred by power and solitude, but a man fiercely guarding something precious, the hope of redemption, the promise of a bond forged in shadow and flame. And as the first hesitant light of dawn pried apart the night, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The quiet of the keep was a fragile thing, as if even the stone walls held their breath after the night's weighty revelations. The torches lining the corridors flickered, casting shadows that danced with long memories, but inside the chamber where Kaelin sat, wounded but unyielding, there was a gentleness that neither had dared to summon before. Leora's fingers moved carefully over his hand, eyes tracing the ragged cut along his knuckles. The skin was cracked, faintly smeared with dried blood, the wound raw but not deep enough to threaten. Her breath was steady, her touch delicate, as if tending to his injury, healing it, tending to it, could somehow undo the century-old scars that cloaked him in solitude. She tore a strip from the hem of her sleeve, dampened it at the basin of water nearby, and pressed it gently to the hurt. The coolness seeped, soothing in a way that words never could. Kaelin's gaze drifted to her, the storm in his grey eyes softening to a rare quiet. He rarely allowed vulnerability, and yet now, as the king's fortress wrapped around them in silence, he did not pull away. The weight of his pain was borne not just on his skin, but beneath his armor, tangled in years of hardened rule and endless war. And here, Leora was not a shadow to be eyed suspiciously, but a tender force, a balm that crept beneath the armor and touched the raw edges of his soul. "You don't have to do this," he said finally, voice low, but not dismissive, as if testing the boundary of this unspoken trust. Her lips curved into a faint smile, one that carried the strength of someone who had been broken and rebuilt 1,000 times. "I don't want to," she murmured, "but I will." Her fingers worked with quiet care, gently cleaning away the scabs, the impurities. As she moved, her eyes held his, a tether stronger than chains. The steady rhythm of her breathing, the scent of herbs from the basin, the faint metallic tang of blood, all swirled around them in a suspended bubble of intimacy neither had ventured into before. The beast at Kaelin's feet shifted, settling closer to the king than ever. Its heavy flank pressed lightly against Kaelin's side. Warm and solid, deep in the creature's low rumble, was a wordless pledge watchfulness and protection. The growl that had once heralded anger or fear now softened a companion's sigh. The beast's immense head turned towards Leora briefly, amber eyes reflecting the glow of the firelight, and, though it held its distance, it allowed the fragile peace to hold. Kaelin exhaled slowly, a sound barely more than a whisper. "You are different," he said, voice rough but sincere. "Than I expected." "Do you mean that as a threat or a compliment?" she teased lightly, though her heart thrummed with a strange new hope. "A promise," he admitted, the corner of his mouth twitching upward, "that this is only the beginning." They sat together in the quiet hands still barely touching, communicating volumes in the silence between them. Neither spoke of the feelings that tightened their chests, the gentle surge of something raw and precarious, but both understood it was there, threading through them like a hidden current beneath the surface. The next day dawned with brittle clarity, the light seeping through narrow castle windows, as sharp and cautious as the truths Leora was determined to uncover. The blood moon ceremony had left threads tangled in her mind, strange glimpses of figures and rituals that whispered secrets she had never imagined could belong to her. She moved through the dim archives beneath the keep, the air thick with dust and forgotten histories. The flicker of old parchment was a language she was unaccustomed to, but in the faded script and crumbling scrolls she began to piece together fragments of an ancient legacy, threads of blood and power, hidden for centuries beneath the weight of lies and silence. Her fingers trembled as she traced the faded seal on a brittle document, the emblem a crescent moon cradling a wolf's paw. Her heart galloped as a breath caught in her throat, a lineage bound not just to the royal line, but to the beast itself, an entwined heritage she had always dismissed as myth. She sank onto a worn bench, the paper trembling in her lap, mind awash with decades of concealed truths. The blood moon was more than a symbol. It was a catalyst, a trigger for powers long dormant. In her veins, beneath the scar that marred her cheek, surged an untapped force, one that connected her across generations to the beast, the blood, and Kaelin's kingdom. The weight of this discovery was nothing short of staggering. She was no mere exile, she was a key, a bridge between man and beast, past and future. But with the revelation came the biting sting of betrayal. How many had lied to her, kept her in the shadows, fearing what awakened strengths she might reveal. Every pounding pulse in her veins echoed with the question, could she claim this power? And if she did, what price would it demand? Kaelin found her still nestled among the scrolls and faded ink, long after sun had shifted the room's light to a bleary grey. She looked up as he entered, her deep amber eyes alight with the storm of discovery. "I found it," she said quietly, voice taut with the magnitude of truths unveiled. "My bloodline is entwined with the ritual, with the beast. The blood moon ceremony is not just tradition. It's a rite of awakening." He came closer, the angles of his face softening as he absorbed her words. The hard-set lines around his eyes seemed to relax, the silent fortress around him momentarily lowered like a drawbridge. "You mean," Kaelin's voice was careful, reverent, "you have the strength to command what I thought only I could control?" She nodded slowly, the weight of her newfound heritage settling between them like a fragile truce. "I didn't know it before, but when that altar was bathed in blood, when I cleaned it, I felt something awaken inside me. It's power, yes, but also a bond we share, a connection woven into the very fabric of this kingdom." Her gaze held his, cautious but unwavering. "This changes everything. If we're linked, if the beast answers to both of us, then the threats that lurk beyond these walls, we might finally stand a chance." Kaelin's storm-grey eyes darkened, suddenly burdened with the deep gravity of a ruler who recognized the flicker of hope in her words. "I should have seen it sooner. You were never just a pawn to be cast aside. You were meant for more." The admission was like an echo, from a place he rarely bared regret, respect, and something tender, almost fragile. He reached out, fingers brushing a loose strand of her dark chestnut waves back behind her ear. "If our fates are entwined, then there is no room for doubt. We stand together, not just as king in exile, but as partners bound by blood and power." A fragile warmth bloomed in her chest, unsteady but true. The walls she had built around herself, shelter forged in fire and endless suspicion, trembled under the weight of his words. She did not trust easily, had learned too well the pain of betrayal, but in this moment, with the beast resting quietly nearby, she dared to believe in something stronger than fear. "Then we start here," Leora said softly, "with truth, with trust, and with the power neither of us expected, but both need." Kaelin's smile was slow, earned, and his hand curled around hers, solid promise that carried through the silence. The path ahead was jagged, riddled with shadows and secrets yet to be uncovered, but together their intertwined legacy was no longer a burden, but a beacon. The blood moon's fading light would not mark the end. It would herald a new dawn. And in that dawn, Leora and Kaelin would forge a future neither had dared claim before. A future born not just of ancient rites, but of a bond fierce enough to break through the darkness and redefine the very heart of the kingdom. The heavy oak doors of the council chamber groaned shut behind her, sealing Leora within a room thick with apprehension and the faint scent of aged parchment and burning tallow. The polished stone floor beneath her feet echoed the sharp clicks of noble boots as the court assembled, faces set in cold masks of authority and skepticism. Eyes flickered toward her from every angle, some disdainful, others wary, and a few veiled with curiosity that dared not fully emerge. "You stand here before us, Leora," a high-born lord intoned voice smooth but laced with an accusing edge. You expect us to believe you now hold sway in the Elder King's court, that you are more than the servant girl dismissed by so many. The chamber's silence grew taut, brittle with tension. Leora met his gaze steadily, the faint scar along her left cheekbone illuminated by the flickering torchlight, a reminder of battles unseen, survival hard won. She was not the frightened outcast they fancied. Every whispered slur, every doubting glance, had fueled a fire inside her that would not be extinguished. "I stand here, not for your approval," she said, voice steady but resolute, "but because the blood moon's truth does not bend to denial or fear. Kaelin did not choose me for weakness, nor for show. Together we have uncovered conspiracies that threatened the very core of this kingdom's secrets. Some among you would prefer remained buried." Her amber eyes ignited, fierce with conviction. "I may have once been cast out, but it was not for lack of worth. It was for power you feared to recognize, and for loyalty misunderstood." Murmurs rippled through the room, some sharp with disbelief, others tinged with reluctant consideration. Another voice pierced the charged air, a woman's, elegant but chilly. "And what proof do you offer beyond the king's favor? Will mere whispers of shadows and danger shield you from consequence? Or will you demand we accept your word because he has, the man who rules with an iron fist and a deadly wolf at his side?" Before Leora could answer, a low, guttural growl unfurled from the shadows beside the dais. Heavy breaths scented with musk and wild earth filled the chamber as Kaelin's beast, once a looming tempest of raw power, now lay curled, yet vigilant. The growl rumbled deep enough to rumble through bones, a warning tethered to loyalty and a promise of protection. The nobles stiffened, eyes wide, as Kaelin's hand slipped to rest on the beast's thick black-haired head, fingers steady. His stormy grey eyes swept the room with a silent command, an unspoken assertion that any challenge levelled at Leora would first answer to the ancient strength coiled at his side. Without a word, the weight in the room shifted. Where once sat a council poised to condemn, now lingered a crack in the armour of suspicion, a quiet acknowledgment that the woman they had scorned was no longer alone to bear her burdens. The court's cold silence evolved, fragile and tentative, into a new discourse painted with the first strokes of alliance. Kaelin's voice, when it came, was measured but laced with unmistakable gravity. The blood moon's trials reveal more than secrets. They test the mettle of the heart, the strength of blood, and the bonds that must endure. If this kingdom is to survive, his gaze met Leora's, heavy with unyielding support. Together, we will face what lurks beyond these walls. There can be no room for doubt, not while my beast stands as her shield. Suddenly, a spark seemed to ignite within the room. Doubt had not vanished, but respect began to root, tentative stems stretching toward acceptance. Leora drew in a slow breath, her heart a steady drum beneath her steady skin. Here in this court surrounded by nobility and intrigue, she was staking her claim, not as a shadow beneath their feet, but as an equal, a bearer of power, both ancient and new. When the meeting adjourned, nobles dispersed, with murmured conversations carrying the undercurrent of change. None met her gaze without a flicker of reconsideration. The path ahead was fraught, yet for the first time since the blood moon ceremony, the air felt less suffocating, less hostile. Something fragile and real had begun to bloom, a promise that the kingdom's future might not be cast in the same old strains of fear and dominance. Later, beneath the vast ink-black sky, Leora found herself alone in the moonlit courtyard. Dew gathering in delicate crystals on the wild ivy-climbing ancient walls, the only light came from the shimmering half-moon, casting silver veins through the branches and pooling in quiet corners. Kalen was there too, standing a few steps away, his presence a steady hearth of strength and calm amidst the night's hush. The beast lay at her feet, his massive head resting softly against her boot's side, peaceful now. The wild tension that had once roared in his eyes softened into something almost